Morning from the World War I gallery in the San Diego Air and Space Museum. This morning we're going to talk about the Nieuport 28, the aircraft behind me, right here. This was the airplane that we didn't want, first of all. In 1918, when they started forming the squadrons, the American Air Group and squadrons, they wanted that SPAD right there. SPAD had developed a reputation as being one of the finest aircraft in the Allied inventory. But the Nieuport was kind of a new aircraft. We did end up getting the Nieuport, and it turned out to be the first aircraft to wear American colors right here. Also, it was the first American airplane in the American squadron to shoot down enemy aircraft. Now, the aircraft itself was in the hands of a good pilot who was probably equal to, he could keep it up with the average German airplane that he was fighting against. It had a 160 horsepower Gnome rotary engine that allowed it to do about 122 miles an hour and get up to 17,000 feet. And these guys used to fly around way up at 15,000 feet on their patrols, which is just about 5,000 feet of where you're supposed to be for putting on oxygen. So half of them were probably hypoxic. One of the advantages of the rotary engines in this airplanes were these things would just crank up. The crew chiefs would come out in the morning, they'd prime the engines, and then you'd run out to the airplane and they would go. Whereas in the SPADs and the other airplanes, it took a while to get them cranked up to go. It did have a few problems. The engines liked to catch fire, and also it had a problem of where the leading edge of the upper wing would come off and pull the fabric off the top of the wing, which it really didn't go over too well with the guys flying it. Now, one of the things about World War I aviation is knowing about the people and the incidents of the aviation, not just the airplanes. So we can just pick three guys that had flown this airplane. There was Eddie Rickenbacker. Eddie Rickenbacker was the squadron leader at one time, and he was the American ace who shot down the most aircraft, 26. Now, he shot down 6 of those aircraft with this airplane before he started flying, before the SPADs came into service. These things lasted about 4 or 5 months initially, and then they were replaced by the SPADs. Another person who flew this airplane was Raoul Lufberry. He was an American, essentially an American who flew for the French before we entered the war. He flew with the Lafayette Escadrille. He shot down 16 airplanes, and he came to the American Air Service, the 94th Squadron represented by this airplane. Oh, by the way, this is a real airplane. It's from World War I. In a duel with a German observation plane, he apparently was hit. His airplane rolled over and he fell out of the airplane. Theodore Roosevelt's youngest son, Quentin Roosevelt, he was killed in a Nieuport, and they named Roosevelt Field in Long Island after him. And Roosevelt Field was the site of a lot of pioneering flights. Lindbergh took off from Roosevelt Field. This airplane has the number 6 on it. That stands for Kenneth Marr, who was a commander at that time. Marr was an interesting guy. He, from California, goes to Alaska. Then he joins the ambulance service. From there, he goes to the Lafayette Escadrille, flies with the Lafayette Escadrille. From there, he transfers over the 94th. He actually ended up in San Diego as the head of the gunnery training program here in his military service. The last thing we'll talk about is the logo. The logo is the hat and the ring. They flew their first mission, their first operational mission. A person came in and said, "Oh, look, we threw our hat into the ring." So there it is. And it still exists. The Hat and the Ring Squadron's flying F-22s out of Langley Air Force Base, Virginia. So come down and see this airplane. It's a cool little airplane.